Well, you mentioned something I wanted to kind of circle back to. You mentioned like something that you're seeing happen now, because this last year to 2 years has been like, say, unprecedented, but it really has in the insurance industry. There's been a lot of changes for underwriting guidelines, for what companies are willing to do, for pricing, right? Like everything. Carriers are shrinking their footprint. Like typically everyone wants business. This last year, nobody wanted business. But you mentioned that you're seeing people who've been in the business for a long time getting out of the business. And that was one of the other things I want to ask you about, is like, what kind of trends do you see in the insurance industry that have become like, hey, we're seeing this happening and we're seeing this moving forward as being a bigger issue?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes me a little nervous, I see it on the independent broker side. I also see it in the carrier side, is just a ton of consolidation. And so when you start to consolidate and these insurance carriers start buying up these smaller regional ones, it's supply and demand. And so it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast too. They were talking about the banking industry, and it's very similar right now. But all these insurance carriers are starting to buy out these smaller ones. These smaller ones have to have a certain amount of capital and liquidity on hand for their financial ratings, and these regionals are just getting hit by claims, and the inflation is just crushing them. And so, I mean, shoot, back when I was in high school, late 90s, I graduated 01, a buddy's bumper got hit or backed into a tree or a light pole or something like that. You could go to the junkyard, pick up a bumper for $500, $700, put it on with your buddies. It was easy. My wife got hit, I don't know, a year ago, and we got a newer Suburban, and there's like 5 sensors in the bumper. There's a camera. There's all this, right? And it was $6,000 to replace the bumper. Yeah. And then it was another 4 months that we were in a rental car at $100 a day for another Suburban, because there was a labor shortage and they didn't have the bumpers in stock. Yeah. So all of a sudden, something that 20 years ago cost $700 maybe to $1,000 is costing just around probably, I don't know, $8-9 after you put rental car and stuff in there. Yeah. So the inflation's just hitting it because they collected all this. The actuaries always run a couple years behind. And so as they set rates for policies, they're playing catch up now. And from pre-COVID to now, and labor shortage and parts being more expensive and manufacturing being more expensive, everything that plays into that, they didn't collect the proper amount of premium at that time to catch up with the inflation that we've had. And so you just start to see them paying out more and more. And so all of a sudden, if you're like, hey, I want to switch companies, and there's fewer companies to switch to, you get kind of locked into that, and it makes it more difficult. And then I think the other piece of that too is all the independent brokers, and you can probably speak more to the captive side a little bit, but our side, what we're seeing is that, we had 4 to 5 brokers in Whatcom County in the last 3 years have sold. Yeah. And some like long-term legacy, multi-generational family owned ones. And, we got people walking in our door saying, I walked into the other place and, I asked for an ID card, and the person there said they couldn't help me, but that their person who's working from home will try to get a hold of them later today. Yeah. And, and people calling, leaving voicemails, not getting a call back. And it's crazy. Just people don't show up anymore. And I feel like that's our job. And so that's where it seems like the market's trending that way, where there's fewer and fewer, community driven, focused owned agencies, whether it's on the captive or our side. And to me, it comes down to serving people well. And so I don't feel like that big side of things is going to do that. Because I feel like you're when you go that route, even though there's good people that work there, there's certain things that they put in place for protocols and operating procedures that they're just not going to do certain things anymore.
Right. It is difficult. And we do see that in general, like, there's a shrinking of footprints. There's a consolidation on the big companies, like you said, because they can, there's something about economy of scale, right? And so if the big company goes, hey, we could take over the small company and we can make it more efficient and we can do it cheaper because we're buying in bulk, we're doing this, right? And then you see the brokerages and independents too, like the captive agencies, there's not as many as there used to be. And that is because it's more cost effective. If I'm getting out of the business, more cost effective for me to sell to somebody who's already in the business than if I'm trying to bring somebody in to take over. I can get more money out of it, right? And I tell people, like, when the big corporates buy a small brokerage, they do leave everything the same relatively at first.
2 years.
Yeah, for a couple of years.
And then you see massive changes.
Right.
It's like to the day.
Because they have to let everyone kind of like ruminate, but they're not going to leave everything the same indefinitely. They're not going to pay as much as they pay for a book of business and then not build in some cost savings long term. So it's like you said, there's great people that still work in those places, but the reality is the companies that bought them have to show a return on that investment.
Oh, yeah, because
so they have to cut costs.
Yeah, and they're beholding to their stock price or their investors.
Yep.
There was one recently. We picked up probably close to 15 accounts on our group medical book because they were under like 20 lives on the account, and so it didn't create enough revenue for that firm that purchased them. So we're in Whatcom County. Most of these clients are Whatcom Skagit County, and they ended up at a call center in Florida.
Yeah.
We had another one on small business stuff. They ended up call center down in Arizona. Yeah. At least Arizona, the time change isn't as big, but a 3 hour, like, you're dealing with someone on the East Coast constantly as your agent.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah. You noon, 1 o'clock, and that's the end of the day for them. So, yeah.
So you see that. And so, you just get pushed to call centers, and personal lines, you're seeing the same thing too. We had someone come in the other day. They said, hey, I had a question, or I needed to add a vehicle, and they were through Safeco, who we have too. They came in, signed all the policies over to us because the current agent said, oh, you need to call Safeco directly to do that because they're on a deal with them and there's a whole E&O thing there. And so they send all that business to there so they don't have to service it in-house.
Wow.
Because of the efficiency factor, right? And so it's like, man, someone walks into you and wants to add a vehicle. It's a pretty simple thing. What's your VIN number? And
yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's not complicated.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that you are seeing that side of it. You mentioned something else, though, that I think is a trend that people don't always think about. You were talking about your wife's bumper.
Yeah.
And all the sensors. We had a customer that they have a moonroof, and it was like a Ford. It wasn't like, this isn't like a Mercedes or a Lexus or a Jaguar, nothing like that. Yeah. It was just like a Ford. I forget what it was. And they have a moonroof. They got a rock chip on it because of the way the glass melds with the windshield.
Okay.
They had to replace the moonroof and the windshield. It was a $10,000 glass repair. And the customer was frustrated. They're like, why is this taking so long? I was like, well, because like normally when they write checks for glass, we're talking $1,000, $2,000. This is $10,000. People don't realize how expensive all of this technology is, right? Because a lot of the moonroofs have like auto dim and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then by the time you get the parts replaced, all the calibrations done, like there's a huge expense to all of those things.
It's technology.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes, you have an engine, but it's a bunch of computers in your car.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. You're buying a smart car now.
Mm-hmm.
Like
whether it's a Tesla or not.
Right.
Which is a whole nother thing because there's more and more companies that don't want to insure Teslas because something little this big happens to it and they're totaled.
Yep.
Right. And same thing with Kias and Hyundais. If they're a certain year because the theft on them is through the roof. And if you live in King County, good luck insuring a Kia or a Hyundai. Right.
Yeah,
so just all those types of things that play into it. Right. Because it's technology in the vehicle that's driving the price of it.
Yeah. People like all of the things that you love about your new car, which are great, but all of those sensors, all of that, like it all costs something.
Yep.
And whenever there's a repair done now, and you think about the safety factors, right? Like the lane assist right? So it beeps at you when you're crossing the fog line, and it'll steer you back. It'll auto stop you. Like, not only is that a concern for like all your calibrations, but like the liability standpoint of the insurance company, if we do a repair and that's not done right, and then there's an accident and that didn't work the way it was supposed to work, now we're getting sued too. So like, you got to pay to have it done right. And that drives up the cost. So the trends are definitely just skyrocketing.
Well, it's crazy, but think about where you're going. They're saying that there's going to be Ubers in 2025 now that are driving people around without a person in the vehicle. Who's liable for that? Yeah. Right. Steve Jostens who owns Hinton's over here, was telling me in the new Silverado, you can just press the button. It'll drive you home from Ellensburg. Go. I mean, it's not just in the Teslas or the electric, the EV vehicles now. It's in a lot of the other vehicles now too, the stuff coming out. And so, and like you said, the calibration, if you go into a mechanic and they do something wrong and they don't calibrate it right, then all of a sudden we're talking about everyone's insurance is involved on that claim.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of penalties and whatnot.